Hi guys, this month we're taking a different approach. Rather than look at common debates in a different theme and try to break down patterns there, we're going to take it one step further and just look at common types of debates as a whole, right? Because after a while, you will see that patterns reoccur in different debates. And if you understand and familiarize your way with dealing with a particular type of debate, then you can recreate the knowledge, skill, strategy, even sometimes arguments that you use in one debate in another debate. Okay, so this week we're going to do debates about debates, and beginning with perhaps the most popular type of debate of all time, I don't want to say, but in many different debate communities, sometimes you only see this type of debate, and that is debates about banning things, right? So things to ban, or what to ban, or how to ban. But mostly it's about, well, you have a problem and you're going to ban that problem, right? So let's look in this debate in detail before I confuse myself even further. So debates about banning, it's very, very important in those debates to identify the problem, okay? So, because there needs to be a problem. If there is no problem, then there is nothing to ban, right? So debates about banning largely are about the problem, and you need to very clearly identify the problem. And the problem doesn't just need to be like huge or severe and so on and so forth, but it needs to be a problem that can be addressed by banning. Okay, so it is a debate about problems and debates about a specific type of solution, that is to ban. Let's look at that solution first. So what does banning entail? Banning is about making something illegal. Pretty much that's it, right? So you're criminalizing a specific type of activity. The state makes a law, says that's illegal. What happens after that is that, you can define what happens in response to that illegality. So people can go to jail. People may have to pay fines. You may have to do some kind of community service, etc. But you must be willing in the end to punish people. Don't have debates about banning if you're not willing to punish people. And if the motion says ban, then you are going to punish people. You can decide the type of punishment, but eventually that punishment can lead to someone going to jail, right? If I don't do my community service, if I don't pay my fines, eventually I may need to go to jail, right? So you don't need to send everybody to jail immediately, but keep in mind what you are doing is putting someone at the risk of going to jail or some other kind of serious, punishment in regards to the law, right? That's what debates about banning asks you to do, but you don't always need to send them to jail, okay? Now, debates about banning will also include usually some kind of campaign. Because if I'm going to put you to jail, I'll usually have a kind of campaign that announces to the whole world that you may go to jail in case you do these things, right? So that inadvertently, there is a public announcement, public service role. Debates about banning will also, therefore, send a message, right? When a state bans something, they're sending this message, like through the campaign, that sends a message on TV's ads and so on and so forth. But they're sending a stronger kind of legal message, because you're saying that this thing is intolerable in society, that the majority of society think this thing is wrong, and have created a law around it. Okay? So that's pretty much what banning does. Now, these things are important because whatever problem that you identify over here must be able to be solved through these things. Right? And of course, primarily through this. Right? If making something illegal doesn't make that thing go away or reduce to an extent, then you don't really need to, or you shouldn't be banning it. Right? Simple? Okay? So it's really, really important then to talk about the problem. What elements of the problem lead to these, by making it illegal will make it go away, right? You need to focus very much so then on the context, the details of the problem, okay? You need to talk about the harm that the problem causes. If the problem is very, very harmful, this is behavior, this activity, sometimes it could even be this person is very, very harmful, then making them illegal is good, Okay, you need to eventually talk about things that are similar, that are banned, right? And that's a good way to learn how to characterize your problem, right? So think about things that society bans, that are similar to this thing. So say we're talking about drugs, what else does society ban that is similar to this drug, or a behavior, what other behaviors are banned, and why is this behavior that you want to ban similar to that, right? And if you can do that, then that makes your banning case stronger, right? So this is that context, and obviously what I've talked about so far applies largely to government. But on what do you do then on opposition? So in opposition, the first thing you need to do again is to think about the problem, right? So on op, you have two approaches, right? So either you say that the problem is not harmful, okay? You don't actually think it's a problem. You think they're overreacting by banning it. You think it's actually not really a big problem. Society needs to kind of get along with the program and accept that this thing is okay, right? Now, if you can show that that thing is okay, or it's just a societal kind of misunderstanding, right? Like drugs, for example, that it's a preconceived notion that marijuana, for example, is really, really bad, and then it's not actually that harmful. So banning it actually creates then more harm, right? So if something isn't really that bad, then what banning will do is make much more harm, because it's not going to stop the demand. People are going to be interested in this still, and because it's banned, they're all going to end up being in jail. Okay, so there'll be a problem-solution mismatch, and it will lead to more harm, right? Or you can say like, yeah, maybe it's a problem, but this doesn't solve the problem. We need a different approach. Okay, so it doesn't work. You need a different approach. You need a different kind of solution. And again, banning will make things worse, right? So when you do this though, when you say it's not a problem, you need to focus on the exact harms, or narrow down parts of which you think may be a problem, right? So for example, again, if we stick with drugs, doing drugs itself is not a problem, but your behavior after you consume drugs, now that's a problem. So if I can regulate your behavior, I can regulate what you do after that, and that doesn't harm people, then fine, right? Then that's a problem. So isolate the exact parts of the problem, or what you think is the real problem, right? So this is the stuff that we need to fix. And if you do this, okay, so if you think that it is a problem, but this doesn't work, right? You will need to do some kind of comparison with these things, right? So earlier the government said that this stuff is similar to other things which we ban. Now you have to say why it's not similar to those things which you ban, therefore we shouldn't ban this. Or it is similar, but that other thing also maybe shouldn't be banned, right? But either way, you need to draw a distinction. If you say it is similar, but you can't show why it shouldn't be banned, then you will need to ban it, right? So if this type of marijuana is exactly the same as other kinds of hard drugs, then you need to ban it, right? But if it's not the same, then I don't need to ban it. Or if it's the same as some other type of drug, then maybe that other drug also shouldn't be banned, because that other drug is also not harmful, right? But you need to take a clear position based on the parts of the problem which you think are actually the problem, right? So if the problem is a harm to others, then we'll just ban the harm to others, not ban the substance as a whole, okay? So that's generally the case and the approach. The opposition team, right, instead of banning, they will take a regulation approach, right? To regulate means to allow, but to set rules around the allowance. And if you regulate something, you can argue that you can control it better than if you ban it. If there is still, and you must show demand. So if there is a demand and something is banned, there will be an illegal source of those products, right? You will create a black market. A black market by itself may not be necessarily bad. It's just a organic market. But if that product is harmful, then in the black market, you can't regulate it. Black markets also lead to, are associated with, at least with other types of crime and criminal activity. And black markets are not taxed. And black markets, you don't get refunds, and crime, other sorts of crimes happen, and you can't protect individuals. And if what you want to do is protect individuals, don't force them to go into unregulated areas, unregulated markets. Okay? So at the end, the debate will become a comparison between banning on one hand versus regulation, right? And which one of these two approaches better addresses the problem at hand, okay? When you're in op, you can take these things, right? So you can talk about campaigning and you can talk about sending a message. Obviously, your message will be different from banning. Banning is a very clear, strong, moral, perhaps, message. Regulation is one of acceptance, or even if you accept, or even if you say it's bad, but we'll regulate, it's hard for you to, it won't be as clear and as bad as the side that says, no, we're going to ban, right? We don't accept whatsoever. Okay. So even if I regulate, I'm not necessarily saying, right, for example, like with legalizing drugs or marijuana, that people should go out there and smoke drugs, smoke marijuana. But I can say that it will be harmful, but I am saying that I allow you to do it. So under regulation, there'll be more people who will do that activity, will take on that behavior, right? Even if I say that I'm not encouraging you to do it, I am allowing you to do it. Okay, so in that sense, the strong, clear message sent by banning is always stronger. Stronger, but not necessarily always good. Okay, because on the op, remember, we're arguing that this thing itself isn't necessarily bad. So the thing itself isn't necessarily bad, or that sending a strong negative message can be harmful, then you don't want to send a very strong negative message. Okay, so it'll come down to banning versus regulation. Every debate about banning, and the major clashes will be about the necessity, right? So is it really necessary to ban? If it's not necessary to ban, then we can just control it. And the necessity will depend on the harm of the problem that you're talking about, and whether or not, banning will work, whether or not banning will not work. Okay? So that's necessity, and the impact of banning. So will it have an overall positive impact? Will it have an overall negative impact? Right? So maybe banning will stop the problem, but banning will also cause so much more harm that it was more harm than whatever was being caused by the problem in the first place, right? So if some kids are on drugs and then maybe they get some wasted lives, but contrast that to a situation where those drugs are banned and it creates so much more harm in terms of prisons, in terms of crimes, in terms of all of these other things, then maybe we're okay, or we should be okay with the smaller harm from allowing that thing in the first place, right? But that's basically what it will come down to, okay? So this is the rough template, of course, for every debate about banning. And the moment you know this, you go into a debate thinking like this, right? You know that if I'm going to ban something, I need to show the problem, right? I need to show why the problem must and can only be solved by making things illegal. Right? I can do these additional advantages of campaigning and messaging, but I need to focus on the legality issue. So I need to show why a super strong message is required, why we cannot regulate, why we cannot accept this on any level, right? So I need to really build the harm of these things, draw correlations to why other things that are similar have been banned, okay? And if you want to be smarter, show why regulation has failed or will fail, right? On the op, I say maybe it's not that harmful. You need to take a position on the problem and show how banning will make things worse, why we must and can regulate, okay? And regulating will make things better. How banning will make things worse. It gives you more control. It creates a black market. There's so many harm, so on and so forth. Doesn't solve the problem, okay? So a lot of it will come down to this, to the problem. At the end of the day, it will be about that problem. And the more detail you can talk about the problem, for example, by discussing stakeholders, etc., right, will be better for you. At the end of the day, your analysis will come down to those things. Who are the people involved? Does it increase, reduce, etc., etc.? And the two major clash points. Is it necessary? What kind of impact will it cause? Okay, if the side that shows that you need to ban in order to solve the problem, and the harms of banning are less than the harms of not banning it, then Gov side wins, right? There will be a support of banning, and the flip for the other side. Okay, so in the book you'll have this other table that lays out the details. Oops, that's gone ahead a bit far. Okay, so it's basically the same thing that I discussed before, right? There's an urgent problem that needs to be solved. Banning is the only way to do it. You must stress the uniqueness of this. You take a strong position, right? The behavior needs to be eradicated. If something is banned, there's no space for it. You're not allowing some or the other, you are banning it. Okay, you don't need to kill the people, but you want it removed from society. And the other side, problem is not huge, let them do it, right? Or banning doesn't help. Okay, regulate away the harmful parts, right? You can go through this in detail, but keep this kind of framework, right? The possible arguments, why this is a huge problem, focus on the problem, why banning works, other methods fail, why banning sends a powerful message. Obviously, depending on the case per se, you can develop more arguments and you'll call them something different, and we'll look at a few examples later, right? And then flip side for the other side, again, discussion of the problem and making things worse compared to regulation, all right? And then overall, there is a clash. This is slightly different here from what I discussed earlier, and this is taking like a philosophical position. Governments that ban are governments that are more interventionist. They either have more stronger positions on what's good and what's bad, and they want to step in. Governments that don't want to ban are governments that are more chill, that lay back, they want to like live and let live, right? And try to take like least interventionist approaches. So it's also quite clever to step back and decide what type of government you want and how you are going to create it. Okay, let's look at some debates. So we got 3 debates today, and what I'm going to do is not go into each one into great depth, but rather just again re-emphasize the approach, right? This week, this month is all about the approach. So the moment you see a debate about banning, you know immediately what Gov is going to do, what Op is going to do. What Gov is going to do, what Op is going to do, right? And then 80% of your work is already done. The other 20% is try to think about how to fit into the case, find your facts, examples, and get a bit more specific and try to figure out what's really specific. Okay, so what we're going to do with each of these topics is look at the specific stuff, look at the general approach, but also the specific questions you need to ask and how they are similar, but also different. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in there a little bit to give us more space. Okay, so first motion, classic banning. This house would ban the sale of clothes made from fur. So what is the exact problem in this debate? The problem that you're trying to solve and you can solve from banning. So the problem isn't like the sale of clothes per se, right? The problem isn't the high price of clothes. The problem isn't that some people have these clothes and other people don't have these clothes. The problem is the animals that are harmed. The problem is the fur, right? So the problem is the cruelty to animals. Right? Now, you need to show why this problem, number 1, is big. Number 2, can only be solved by banning. Right? So big, I need to emphasize the cruelty. So I need to show it is really cruel. Animals are skinned. Okay? Some of them skinned alive. They're not beaten because they don't want to damage the fur and so on and so forth. You can connect it to an endangered element or animals that are less likely to be found. So even if they're not critically endangered, they are still kind of rare and unique because that's what the type of furs that people want, right? And what else? You can talk about so what is the exact harm? The harm is emphasized with why this notion is cruel. Now, there will be a discussion around this, whether or not this is acceptable, not acceptable, right? On the other side, you're going to talk about, and I'll go in green. So is it really cruel? Because, hey, we eat animals, right? So one of the clash issues will be about this notion of cruelty. From Gov, I think it's good when you remember I was talking about things that are similar, not similar. You emphasize right from the start why, yes, we eat, but there's a distinction with cruelty. Even if you consume animals, animal abuse is still a crime, right? and celebration of that abuse is still a crime. And you can make a distinction based on which things are necessary or not necessary. Right? So eating may be necessary to an extent, but fur is definitely unnecessary. Right? And so therefore it's cruel, but also the methods are really, really cruel. Okay? So the first thing then is that harm that you emphasize from the problem. And the second thing is, right, why regulation and stuff doesn't fail. Doesn't work. So it is necessary. You need this solution. Okay, so the solution is banning. Because so here you're focused on a demand aspect. Okay, so you say the solution the problem here needs to be banned because, or rather, banning is the best way to solve this problem because then that cuts out the demand, right? So people can't buy these things, then no one is going to make these things. And the moment you see these things, you know that these things are illegal and are bad. That along the process, the people who were like, cruelly skinned animals and stuff were involved. Some pretty harmful, cruel things were involved. You can't regulate it because it's hard to ascertain where it's from, where it's not from. By looking at the item itself, you don't know whether animal cruelty was involved in the production of this item or not. Okay, so that's why this is the best type of solution. Okay, and those are the arguments that you would make, right? So you talk about the harm, you would talk about the solution, why this works and why regulation fails, right? What else would you do? You need to talk about some notion of animal rights, right? And discuss cruelty. So why humans should take a position, or why governments should take a position on cruelty. Okay? Why it's within the gambit, within the mandate of modern governments to take this position, and how we can lead to benefits in terms of environmental awareness, our rights as animals, and so on and so forth, right? What do you do on OP? So I discussed a little bit in terms of that problem. So on OP, you can either talk about whether it is a problem, not a problem. I think here, depending on how hard you want to go on OP, you have some freedom. OP, you can take a very hard line and say like, hey, I don't care. Animals have no rights. We eat them. I will eat any animal, endangered, not endangered, unless you can show that that's going to harm humans. If you can show if it has no harm on humans, then I'm going to eat it, right? Because my priority is humans. And not just human sustenance, but human enjoyment, human fun, right? Human culture, human quality of life, right? Actualization. It's important for me to have like this, very rare mink coat. All of those stuff, right? You can take that position, so you don't really care at all. Skin, not skin, however they were made, right? Or you can say that maybe some of the most cruel parts are problematic to an extent. Hunting endangered animals may be problematic, but that's why we need to regulate, because as long as you ban, people are even ban but don't remove the demand, people will still want to buy it, right? So I will make things illegal, I will make it legal, but you can create some standards. You can say where this is from, it needs to be sustainably farmed, etc., 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 right? In this debate, I think you need to go on the slightly more harder aspect. It's very hard for you to concede that animals have a lot of rights. You can say that animals are for human enjoyment. If enjoyment is too hard of a word, then for human fulfillment. Okay? To lead to things that make humans fulfilled. And you can talk about this from just a happiness point of view. You can talk about cultural point of view, since from ancient times people used fur, although this isn't really a debate about sustaining indigenous lifestyles, right? So you kind of have to talk about fashion, pretty much, okay? So you can't completely eradicate all the cruelty, so the better approach is to change the standards of cruelty. Okay? Standards of cruelty or harm. So here, what you're trying to do is to take a position on the problem, right? This is going back to whether or not this is a problem or not a problem, right? You are saying that even though it sounds bad, it's not really a problem because we accept it in society. And if you're going to make this into a problem with banning, then there are many other things, my friends, that you will need to ban, right? Ban the slaughter of animals because that can be really cruel. Ban people eating foie gras, right? Ban people eating veal or baby animals because all of those things are unnecessary and are cruel, okay? So that on one level, and then the other level is talking about why the solution is not going to work and why you will create a black market for these things. Although it's slightly different here because if you are wearing fur, I can pretty much see it, and people buy fur not to keep at home and consume in privacy, but to kind of wear publicly, right? So in a way, it's hard to have that kind of black market of fur. It's not something you wear with your friends. It's only with your friends, rather. It's something that you wear when you go out, right? So that's pretty much the debate on banning fur. Let's look at the next one. Okay, so whether or not athletes convicted of domestic violence should be permanently banned from sport. So look at the debate again. What exactly is the problem here? So the problem is domestic violence, right? The problem also is that the current solutions against domestic violence have failed. So punishing them, sending them to jail, all those things have failed. So the status quo has failed. And domestic violence, I'm going to put DV, is a huge problem. Okay? So you need to build up that problem and make it really, really big. And talk about why if we allow these athletes to continue playing sports, then they are glorified, they are supported, they become role models to others, right? So all this is part of your problem, right? Because what you're doing is taking them out of the sport, okay? So you need to think about anything that keeps them in the sport and make that a problem, right? This is you contextualizing the problem. So if that person's playing later, that person's going to be portrayed as a positive thing, and people will forget about all the bad things that they've done and celebrate them. And then they will believe that as long as you can do these amazing sporty things, then it's okay, right? Like Floyd Mayweather Jr. recently won boxing match, made like $180 million or something from this one boxing match, and people celebrate him. He's one of the richest people on the planet. Yet he was in jail for abusing his wife. He's clearly has some pretty strange positions on violence and against women. But hey, what we remember, what we know about him is these things. We know that he is such a fantastic person and a great athlete, and it can harm the perception of other people. So that's also part of the problem, right? The link to violence. You will need to show that there is some kind of link to domestic violence in society. That people will feel that that's okay, that are more likely to do it, or commit acts of microaggression. So even if they don't go out there and kill or rape women, their attitude towards women will be weaker. And we're all going to assume that this is domestic violence of men versus women because that's the majority of cases, although some of it does happen in reverse, right? So that's pretty much the problem as you outline. And again, the solution then is banning. So when you outline, when you outline a problem like this, right, the problem has to really connect it to this notion of like role models and seeing them in sports. Like the problem is you can see them over and over again. Then the problem, you're not saying that they're not punished, but you're saying that even though they're punished, seeing them after makes them all the bad stuff forgiven and then re-emphasizes the fact that they are wonderful, right? And that's the problem. And if you want to extend it, it doesn't have a huge impact on other athletes because we see this still happening. There's a very high rate of these athletes committing domestic violence, right? So you want to send a strong message to the athletes and to the fans that what they're doing is bad, it's unacceptable, it is terrible, and we don't want anything to do with them again, right? We don't want to put them into a position where they can influence other people. where they can say things positive about their behavior, like even if they regret, what if they don't regret, right? What if they do these things again? What is the message that they are sending to other people? So you are taking a very, very hard line here, but therefore you need to build up the problem and make it really, really big. Okay, so things you can do is talk about domestic violence, talk about how often it happens, talk about how it's unreported, right? And if these athletes can get away with it, then many other people can get away with it, okay? So on OP, you can't say that domestic violence is not a problem, right? You're going to say that it's a problem, but say that this doesn't help, right? You can say that the scapegoats these people, but it doesn't help them from changing people's views. You can say that it will make things worse. Because if the risk is that this person will lose their job and all their money, then maybe people are not going to complain. Right? They're going to hide it. Their spouses, their girlfriends, their wives, maybe they will take the money. Okay? This is going to be a bit of a clash, or whether it will work, whether it will not work. I think you can, to kind of foresee this, Gov should argue a context where they will get a settlement anyway, they will get lots of money. If they were not going to complain, if they're not going to complain because of being abused, then I think this is not going to make a difference. At least Gov can argue, right? Because being punished is still a big deal, and maybe they will still hide. Many women don't complain. What happens to her aggressor isn't really a big deal in terms of, it plays a role, right? But it's not the defining thing about whether or not she complains or whether she doesn't complain, right? Or whether she files charges or doesn't file charges. You can argue, again, it's divided, like that's why it's a debate, but you can argue that on Gov, that victims will be motivated regardless, or maybe even more motivated if they know that public is going to take a strong position. It's not going to be their fault, and this person will not continue becoming celebrated and will be a big hero, right? That it's clearly something that's terribly, terribly wrong, right? And that will make that it will still increase the amount of protection that she will be afforded, because it will make these people think twice, 3 times, 4 times before they even get to that stage, right? And deal with their aggression. On the other side, you say like, no, it's very difficult, very complicated. These things happen at home. Yes, we want them to complain. We want athletes to be able to confess, to go for treatment, to go for therapy, to serve some prison time. And we want to believe in second chances, right? To say, I'm reformed, and then play if you can play. If you can't play, then then you lose. That's a huge risk. But if you ban them, then it's far less likely that they're going to admit to these things. They're going to hide them. They're going to suppress them. It's going to be far more dangerous, right? So that is a huge clash, and I think the most powerful clash on the other side, whether it will work, whether it will not work, right? So this is the impact, and that's the solvency. Tripping over myself here. Whether it will work, whether it will not work, okay? I'll put that there, right? And that's the biggest thing. I think that's pretty much what this debate will come down to. Unlike the other debate, I don't think you should have a debate about standards, right? Like why some people need to be punished more or punished less, why this crime isn't this deserving of, banning or not banning. You can have, if you want, a debate about second chances or double jeopardy, or a comparison with other types of professions. Like if an accountant is convicted of domestic violence, it doesn't mean that they can't be an accountant anymore. Whatever you do has to be tied into your job, right? Like if I'm a school teacher convicted of molesting my students, then maybe I shouldn't be a school teacher anymore. But this has nothing to do with them being athletes. But I think that's going to come down to the whole role model perception part of the debate. And if OP wants to, you can address that too. You can say that whether or not, obviously people are going to watch them more. There's going to be a lot of scrutiny. Maybe they should have the opportunity to show that they can be reformed, that punishment or therapy or these things help, and they will encourage other people to get those things in the first place, right? So in OP, you take a far more kind of rehabilitative approach, right? Rehabilitative and trying to solve the problem, try to engage the issue. On Gov, you take a more kind of punitive approach, right? You believe in a strong message. You think that is what will lead to prevention. That will stop this from happening. They will make it something that's really, really bad, and not try to get people to admit and cure and etc. etc. Okay, but that's pretty much, so that again is the debate about banning, right? So it comes down similarly to the framework earlier. You talk about whether it'll work, whether it'll not work, and you really characterize the problem. Will more women come out now? Will athletes think twice? How will other people view the problem of domestic violence, right? Will they think this is overkill, or will they go like, yes, this is serious enough, so we need to take it really, really seriously, right? Or on the other side, will they have more positive attitudes towards it if we don't do this? Okay, so that's, my friends, debate about banning and domestic violence. Lastly, banning alcohol advertising. Okay, so again, very quickly now, you should be good at this. Problem, alcohol, advertising. Is this debate about the type of advertising? Too many sexy ladies? False advertising? No, it isn't. The problem is on consumption of alcohol, right? Or rather, overconsumption. I'm gonna put this here, okay? Problem, overconsumption of alcohol. Okay, now you need to connect the advertising and this problem. Okay, so in this debate, you can see very clearly what OP is going to do is concede this problem. It's hard for OP to say that overconsumption of alcohol, and especially if you put the word over in there, right, is okay. So they will say like, yeah, that's a problem, but it's not related to advertising. So here's another solution for that problem, right? And that's what this debate, I think, is going to come down to. So on Gov, you need to really connect this. You need to talk about advertising, right? So you need to show how advertising leads to this. How advertising glorifies alcohol consumption. It makes it seem fun and cool. How advertising makes it seem commonplace, right? Like everywhere you go, it's very suggestive. It's hard to go to some place and not see it. And if you're there, then you will think of having it, right? You can also frame overconsumption. If overconsumption is just about people who like drink 5 bottles of whiskey a day, then it's a very small set. It's going to be very hard for you to prove. If overconsumption is about people who drink 1 beer a day, then that again is problematic. Then you are going to, the problem is too huge, the problem is too common, and doesn't really seem like a problem, right? So talk about things which people do kind of regularly, but is also really harmful, right? So maybe people drinking 1 bottle of soju every day is overconsumption. Not a lot of people do that, but enough people do that it becomes a problem. It's not immediately problematic, but it can have some serious consequences. It can lead to alcohol dependency, like I need alcohol. If I don't have it, I feel strange. It can lead to some pretty serious health concerns, right? If you're drinking significant amounts of alcohol on a very consistent basis. And I think that will be a good kind of definition of overconsumption, because that's something that advertising plays in as well. Advertising doesn't encourage you to binge drink, but advertising encourages you to constantly drink, right? So you drink a little bit every day, or you drink quite a bit every day. You want to get to that kind of buzz feeling every day. Your day feels incomplete if you don't have a significant amount of alcohol. It's a strange day if I don't have this much of alcohol, right? I don't have to fall down drunk, but I'm still having quite a lot of alcohol, and that is your definition of overconsumption, right? So I think that's pretty good. So you're not against people drinking a little bit, drinking now and then, but constantly drinking, making it a significant part of your lifestyle, you think is a problem, okay? And if you define it like that, then advertising ties in very well to overconsumption, right? So what will be important in this debate, I think, is to show the harm. And you're going to show the harm of binge drinking. You're going to show the harm of constant drinking. right? Now, binge drinking harm, I think, will be conceded. You need to show the harm of constant drinking. And constant drinking, you show the harm of a slow build-up over a long term, right? And it's more likely to have some binge drinking. If I don't drink constantly, it's less likely I'm going to binge drink. But if I do drink constantly, it is more likely I may binge drink. Alright? So all that will paint a pretty strong picture of harm. And if you sell this, then your connection to advertising, I think, will be quite straightforward. Right? So if the problem's like this, then the solution will be pretty easy. Okay? I'm just going to ban it. Alcohol doesn't need any kind of advertising. People can say what they sell, and if you want to buy it, you buy it. But you don't need to glorify it. You don't need to advertise. And advertising in nature is persuasive. Okay? So you can make a distinction here. You can inform that it exists, but not persuade, which is what advertising does. What do you do on op? Op, you can't say binge drinking is okay, right? You can say constant drinking may not be as harmful. Content, right? So say it's up to the individual. If people balance this out with good exercise and other parts of healthy diets, drink lots of water anyway, and or if they know that, how harmful is this compared to drinking 10 cups of coffee a day or all this other stuff, right? So the harm is not as serious as like binge drinking, right? But even if you think it is, you can educate people, okay? Because what you're doing here is not going to work. Now, the harm of banning advertising per se is maybe a little bit tricky because you're not going to have a black market, right? For advertising, that doesn't work. Advertising by nature needs to happen in open. You can talk about the harm to the rights of companies, right? Companies have a right to sell or to persuade people around their products. What would be interesting in this debate is to discuss the different types of companies. Okay, so big companies and small companies. And you can talk about how small companies may be affected more by this because big companies already have an established brand and everyone knows them. Small companies don't. So the only way small companies can get their word out is through advertising. And yeah, it's harder for them to compete with the big companies. But if you ban advertising, it's going to be even harder for them to compete with the big companies. And that means that the consumers will lose, right? Because the big ones end up controlling the market anyway. On op, you can talk about some kind of regulation, right? You can regulate who sees these ads. You can regulate how often they're displayed. You can regulate whether it's on, TV, whether it's on sporting events. You can do that kind of regulation to kind of control the impact. It's hard for you to say, I think, that ads have no impact, because if they have no impact, then this argument, the rights of the consumers and stuff, will fail, right? So they do have an impact. It does give the word out and does persuade people. But if you're concerned about that impact, then, we can manage the impact. We don't have to completely remove them. Okay? So again, the debate will come down to the impact of the solution. Is it going to be more positive or negative? And who is going to be more positive or negative to? And the harm of the problem. How big, how small exactly is this harm? Will it go up? Will it go down? Will it increase? Will it decrease? So on and so forth in regards to this, right? Do you actually need to ban advertising to reduce the problem of overconsumption? And if you do ban advertising, will it actually lead to the problem of overconsumption or not? Okay? So, whoops, that's not what I planned to do. What I hope you see in this discussion, lecture, video, is that there are a clear kind of approach for all of these debates, right? All three of these debates have a clear problem that they're trying to highlight. The better you kind of characterize this problem and look at it will help you fit it to the solution, right? So if I want to ban alcohol advertising, the problem is to do with alcohol connected with advertising, and scope that type of problem to help me, right? If I want to ban athletes, then the problem isn't just domestic violence, but how athletes, or the perception of domestic violence of people who commit it, right? So I need to talk about why the people can continue to do these bad things. That's the bigger problem for me, rather than just that bad thing on its own. Because if it's just that bad thing on its own, then punishing that bad thing on its own is good enough to solve the problem, right? So the first thing is, in debates about banning, characterizing that problem or the type, the aspect of the problem, and tying it as close as possible to banning is really, really important. Okay? And that's the second thing. You are going to ban. You need to talk about why banning is important. What are the impacts on banning? Who does it impact? Right? On more or less. Which impact are you willing to accept? Which impact are you not willing to accept? Okay? There you go, my friends. A comprehensive, I hope, analysis on types of debates about in terms of banning. You will see these debates more and more, and well, not more and more. I mean, yeah, maybe after this you'll see them more and more. But I meant to say you will see a lot of these debates. Okay, so learn how to approach these debates rather than what arguments you can use in which specific debate. If you have the model of that approach, then you can very quickly adapt that model into many other different debates, right? Thank you for watching and have fun debating.